I don't want to lose friendships over things that don't really matter. I don't even remember why, we were fighting or arguing at that time, but I know that we're still friends with that person, and that's more important than anything else. Don't lose a friendship over something that doesn't even matter, or just because you're wanting to prove to be right.
This morning you were having a conversation with someone, giving them advice on how to have difficult conversations with others. Can you share some of that advice?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you got to realize when you recognize a difficult conversation needs to be had, it's because something's being affected. There's a behavior, there's a situation that's affecting something else in a negative way. And once you realize that something's being affected negatively, it needs to be fixed. It makes it easier to have that conversation. One, you either care about the situation, you care about the person, or you care about both. And if you care about both, the conversation gets even easier. You don't want to see people fail. You don't want to see systems fail. You don't want to see a business or organization fail. So it takes difficult conversations with everyone. But if they understand that you care about them and you want the best, not only for the organization or the business, but the best for them, that makes the conversation a lot easier. And two, you want to be straight up. Like, don't beat around the bush. Don't try to lead them into, a trap, confession or conversation or something. Just be straight up and say, hey, look, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I've heard. Can you tell me, from your point or your position, how the situation came about, or what you think about this situation, or, hey, we're having a problem with you doing this task. Can you tell me why you're having that problem? Hey, this is the mark that we need you to hit. Can you tell me why you're not able to hit it? And allow them to speak as well. It can't just be, I'm going to bring you in and I'm going to tell you what you need to know, and then I'm going to release you. It needs to be a two-sided conversation. If you care about them, you want to understand their point, their feelings, and why things are happening on their end as well. So keep love at the middle of the conversation, and I think everything will go great.
What are some mistakes you've seen people make when having difficult conversations?
I think the biggest mistake is assumption, and accepting one person's story before hearing the others. Going into a conversation loaded already, you could say, with I know what happened. I have someone who told me what happened. So, I'm going to get after this person. Which really, you really don't know. You weren't there, so you don't know the situation. So I think assuming. The second thing is having the conversation in your mind before it actually happens. We see this happen a lot. It's happened to me a lot. You see it happen in your relationships with your spouse. But you have this conversation in your mind that never takes place. So you walk in. Take for instance this. Okay, I'm gonna talk to my wife about this, but I know her already, and I know when I talk to her about this, she's gonna say this, and if she says this, then I'm gonna say this, and I know she's gonna say this, but I'm putting my foot down and I'm gonna say this. And you've had this whole conversation in your head that hasn't even existed, so you go into that conversation already frustrated and upset and mad, and it 90% of the time will not even go how you thought it was going to go. That's just your own personal, feelings or issues that you're having. So one is don't assume you know the whole story. Two, don't have the conversation in your head. And three is you have to go in from that perspective of you want the best for everybody, including the person that is having the hard conversation.
I noticed that sometimes when people go into the conversation, like you said, they already go in with their preconceptions. But I've heard you say that it's necessary to just pause and think about everything. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to pause before you go into a big thing like that?
Yeah, well, the good word says you got to be slow to speak and quick to listen. And I've learned over the years, because I used to be really reactive. and it would always end up in an argument. But a lot of times people just can't get out what they're trying to say. So if you're slow to speak, 90% of the time you can help someone communicate what they're trying to say. And I'm not saying putting words in their mouth or changing the words they're saying and, oh, you're saying this and you must mean this. No, help them really grasp what they're trying to say. If you listen long enough, you'll find that, man, most of the time that person's on the same side as you. They want, people in this world are good. Sometimes they just don't know, how to do the right thing or to convey what they're feeling, on the inside. And it leads to an argument or a fight before you really find out what's going on. I've had tons of those conversations where, man, you end up, in this shouting match. And in the end, it was all because I was too quick to speak. And I should have listened more, and I would have understood from the beginning that, it just shouldn't have been that way.
So you said that you used to be reactive and now you're not as much, and you're working towards improving on that. When you realized that, was it out of self-evaluation or someone having a difficult conversation with you about that?
It was I would say it was probably both. I was tending to get into confrontations more and more with more people, and after Zelda making me self-reflect on what's going on, I learned that was one of the things. There's a quote that I came across from Viktor Frankl, and it said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is your power to choose your response. And in that response lies growth and freedom. And it just really spoke to me that morning, during my quiet time. And I realized that, man, I needed to be slower to speak and quicker to listen. I need to evaluate, that response, because you're going to be, between stimulus and responses, someone's going to make you angry. Somebody's going to say something that you don't agree with. But there's a time between that happens and your response where you can think about, what am I going to say? How am I going to handle this situation? Is it even worth me arguing about? Like, do I even care that much about what they said or, what it pertained to that I want to have an argument? And a lot of times it's like, it's not even worth it. So I'd rather just be quiet, choose to whether I agree or disagree, not to even respond to it and move on. One of the things that I learned through all of that is that, sometimes you have to give up your right to be right. I was always that person who I wanted to be right. So I'm going to argue with you, to the end to prove my point. And I realized that I don't have to be right all the time. It doesn't matter. Most of the time when you get into a conversation with your spouse and you prove that you're right, you still end up sleeping on the couch anyway. So I'd rather be wrong in my comfortable bed than right all the time.
Let's say that let's say that somebody has had a difficult conversation, they didn't take your advice, and now the relationship is messed up, whether between a husband and a wife or between an employer and employee or coworkers or friends. What advice can you give that person as to how to build the bridge between the relationship?
We'll take it all the way back to kindergarten. I'm sorry. You have to apologize. You just got to apologize and then keep the butts out of it, though. I've seen times where people will stand up and apologize, but then they say, but I did this because you did this. And really, if you care about the relationship and you want to mend it, you want to have forgiveness, and you just want to say, look, man, I'm sorry the way I spoke to you, the way I reacted. That shouldn't have happened. You don't even have to revisit the conversation. If they want to bring the conversation back up, you can say, hey, look, you know what? We're not going to agree on it. This is how I felt, but I shouldn't have voiced it the way I did. But let's just move on. Sometimes it moving on means maybe you're no longer together in the same business or organization, but you can still, squash things and move on as friends. But our business mentor, one time we had got into it, me and Alex, with a friend of ours who was working with us, and we went into his office and we were mad and angry, and he stopped us and he said, "Do you really want to lose a friendship over a $2 t-shirt?" And it just stuck with us, all this time. We're like, man, I don't want to lose friendships over things that don't really matter. I don't even remember why, we were fighting or arguing at that time, but I know that we're still friends with that person, and that's more important than anything else. So don't lose a friendship over something that doesn't even matter, or just because you're wanting to prove to be right.
That's good. So that's advice as far as there's been a disagreement or difficult conversation in private. How do you handle disagreements that are made public in front of other people?
That's a tough one, because pride would tell you that you argued with me in front of everybody, you need to apologize to me in front of everybody. But the reason why you want that public apology is because your pride was hurt more than anything. If you can humble yourself enough and live with humility, then that won't be as important to you. It does tell you something about the other person's character if they're willing to do that to you in front of people, but then think they could just come in private and, I'm sorry, let's move on. That's wrong also. So that tells you something about their character as well. So then you have to choose moving forward if that's somebody that you really want in your life. But you don't need a public apology for a public argument. But it definitely is something that you can use to determine how that relationship is going to go moving forward.
You said you have to decide whether or not that's someone you want to have in your life. What's a healthy way of deciding or making that decision as far as who is, as some people may say, toxic to a toxic person, and then who is a person that really does have your good in interest without trying to manipulate you? How do you make those evaluations?
That's a tough one. I would say sometimes you just got to take a step back. I think if you take a step back, if it's somebody who's really that close to you in your life, but y'all just can't get on the same page in regards to that, sometimes you have to just take a step back, and that person is going to either come to you and say, "Hey man, I haven't seen you in a while. What's going on? Hey, we haven't talked in a couple of weeks. Did I miss something?" Or they're going to forget about you. If they forget about you and you don't hear from them for a while, then you really weren't, I guess, didn't mean that much to them as far as having that close relationship. They may be someone you just see every now and then, a couple times a year. You're cordial. Hey, how you doing? We're still friends. But those real close relationships, that person's going to come and say, "Bro, you ain't called me in a week, 2 weeks, if something happened." And then you can address the fact that, like, "Hey, look, I feel like every time we're together, you try to shame me in front of people. You try to put me down in front of people. You always want to argue with me in front of people. Like, I consider you one of my close friends, but, I don't understand why you do that to me all the time." And then make them aware of it. They care about you. They're going to try to make changes in their life to accommodate that.